da ra 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 ra, da ra 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 ra, da ra ra ra, da ra ro, dum, bum pa ra ra dum da ra ra, bum pa ra ra, bum da ra ra dum da ra ra, bum da ra ra, dum da ra ra dum da ra ra, dum da ra ra, bum bum pa ra da dum. If it takes forever, huh? Okay, please.
Now, did you guys say you couldn't decide who should come up?
Right up to the last
No,
moment.
we're gonna sit for a while. Still gonna sit for a while with that. Would you revisit where we were just now? Please revisit where we were just now. It was a very special moment, and let it find a place where you can store that now. Okay, then we'll continue. Amen.
So right up till the time I walked here, we weren't sure who was going to speak for the Libras. The first thing that came to us was an agreement that beauty was very important to us. And from beauty, we went into harmony. And the question we finally came up with after a lot of making sure that everybody was feeling good about the question was how to ask somebody to discover their own beauty. Where does the beauty lie within them? To help them find and discern their own beauty.
There was something happening in the 60s, 70s, when the best thing you could say about somebody was you'd say, what a beautiful being, you know. Beautiful. Beautiful was the word. It hadn't gotten yet to the place where beautiful could also be a stinker, you know. It had the sense of beautiful, a kind of integration, something that there was, like I said, harmony, symmetry about things, the balance and so on. So what question comes out of there?
Well, it was to encourage somebody to discover their own beauty, but also to ask them how they would find harmony in their lives. And we talked a little bit about the difference between trying to get things balanced as opposed to getting things harmonized, and seeing the value in the harmonization as opposed to getting it all somehow balanced and equal. And we also struggled a little bit with wanting to stay with the both and around choices as opposed to forcing people to do an either or choice. So that was another place about how do you make choices how do you think about things in ways that allow you to have more than one thing that you want and it's important to you.
Something about narrative will have to come in here, okay? So that you may need to expand it to get that a little bit better. Let me spell something out here. Show me a person who doesn't have multiple obligations. And if I were to check out with people what their obligations are, what they have committed themselves to, I'd find them distorted. You know, it's almost if I were to look at the energy field that happens when we are torn in so many directions, pulled in so many directions. I describe this as being Gulliver lying on the ground and all the Lilliput strings are tying him down. And it should be simple to break those strings, but there's so many of them and you get torn in all directions. This is a little excursion I'm taking with you now, okay? Yom Kippur. What's necessary is we always begin Yom Kippur with Kol Nidra. We say all the vows that we have made, they should be like annihilated. They no longer are. Now that sounds like some kind of declaring a cheap bankruptcy, you know? That's not how it is meant to be used. So I give you an example. There was the year that I was asked by Essel in San Francisco to conduct high holiday services there. So here we are before Yom Kippur. And I described to the people how many ties we have. But now Yom Kippur is coming. And we need to clean things up, you know. We need to become purified. We need to be forgiven. But can you imagine how many socially unpaid bills I have? You know? People come with their expectations of me and hold out a bill. You owe me this, I expected from you this, I expected from you that, you know. And if I have to go through my life all the time with all those pulling things from all sides, I can go crazy. So one of the things that Sartre was writing about was just this thing about you have infinite responsibility. Everything that you do, you know, you for every one of the consequences, you're responsible. Impossible to live that way. So there was in the late 50s that Sartre was really hot at that point. And I had to work this one through. And it got to me that I can't work it out unless I put all of those things, as it were, into God's bag. And then the issue was, which one is next? And it's no longer my question, it already comes to me from a certain kind of order that's established. Now, if you figure that there are rules like 613 commandments and so on and so forth, you get the idea that you ask, what's the next task that I have to do? And it comes out of an organismic wholeness. But otherwise, it's all torn into pieces, and it's impossible. So it doesn't mean that it has to be homogenized. You know, it just means that it has to be organismically related. And here is where I feel that if I could take people, we'll get back to the process later, I really need to say this. If I could get people to a place where I could have a series of sessions of the catechism, the new catechism that's needed for the world, that would have as its cosmology, that cosmology that Earth needs in order to heal. Okay? and that would have as its commandments the ethic that derives from that cosmology, and that would have in its tradition the upaya, the skillful means to get yourself to that place where you could live that ethic. Okay? And then if I could get some people who would be able to work through that business of transpersonal sociology that's happening here, to be able to understand these things on this deeper level, that would be very, very helpful, very important. In the past, religions have had the notion that if we only had our way, if everybody believed the way in which we did, everything would be fine. And in fact, when the Messiah will come, all the Goyim will find out how wrong they were. When Jesus will come again, he'll say to those Jews, "You didn't hear me the first time, go away," The last Imam is going to come, and some will go over that bridge and others will go into perdition, and so on and so forth. What you got was a notion that people call triumphalism. If everybody would hold on to the way in which we think, we would triumph. And in fact, history is so set that there has to be the triumphal moment, because otherwise we're going to be in trouble all the time. We'll never get out of exile. There will be that moment when we will all be redeemed. Salvation is going to come, and it'll come because of our way being the winner, triumphing. And then we saw the planet from outer space. And it made such a shift. We didn't see boundaries anymore. And we began to realize that Earth is alive. Earth is alive. Not only is she alive, she also has a consciousness. And if you think that the number of people who need to take Prozac for depression is only because of their personal stuff, I think you're wrong. We are feeling the depression that's coming from our Mother, the Earth. It looks like, when are those guys going to wake up? When are they going to think straight about it? When are they going to take seriously that they're fouling their nest, and all this is coming up. And there seems to be a despair almost coming up from there. And it's hitting us, it's touching us in some way. No matter how much they're going to divert us with movies and with media and so on and so forth, that is underneath, it's welling up for us. So if I could, I would want to make people realize that every religion is a vital organ of the planet. Could you imagine if someone were to say you should only be liver? Who asked you to be stomach and guts? You should only be liver. We live because we're an organism, because we're connected, because the liver is helping the heart, and the heart is helping the lungs, and the lungs are helping the kidneys, and so we are integrated together, and that's what you're looking for. You're saying, I want to be able to have that way in which we can all these parts will be honored in a good way. So I would like to go around and ask people, besides the religion that you have, and you can keep it, but I'd like you to also add to it, hyphenate something with Gaian. So you could say, I'm a Gaian Christian, I'm a Gaian Muslim, I'm a Gaian Jew, in that way. To be able to say, I am a cell of this living being here. When I think that I'm in this business only for myself, I'm a rogue cell, I'm a cancer cell. And when you take a look and see socially how many inflammations they're going on and what cancers they're going on, and you see this, even the way in which business is organized, it's like saying, if the liver wins, then the kidneys lose. I mean, that's the way General Motors and Ford operate with each other, So when you get the notion that there's another way of thinking about this thing, not to tear it apart, but bring it together. So I'd like to be able to initiate people into that, so that they would have a feeling, I am a cell of this living earth, and my job is to honor all those things that I have to do as that living cell. But only as that living cell, not more than that. So I come back to this business of that Yom Kippur. So we ask the people to sit with each other, and each one should then say, the questioner says, to whom are you committed? Are you committed to your husband? Are you committed to your wife? Are you committed to your children, to your boss? And we would list all those commitments, and the other person would say, and you're free of it. You're free of it, you're free of it, you're free of it, free of it. So that before we started Yom Kippur, people could feel, now I don't have any guy wires pulling me this way or that way. It's just me and God at this point. Then when Yom Kippur was over, we sat down again and we took them on again. And we said, yes, this one I take on, this one I take on again. And when it came to one that we didn't want to take on, we would say, this one is not anymore. I'm going to drop this one. I don't want this for the next year for me. Okay? And the person would say, what is the karmic debt that you leave behind that you have to straighten out if you're going to drop that? So you see that here we were engaged in a process that was the process of sorting out our relationship things. Sometimes I ask the question in a different way. We are all sitting here and being together, but in the back of our mind, there are some people watching us. Who is your inner audience, And that's a very interesting question. Who's on your inner board of directors? And there may be some time that you say, and this one is off the board, This one will no longer have a vote inside of me. Do you see what I'm saying? We're talking about the introjects, we're talking about those social commitments and so on. Where do we want to wind up? And that brings me now to you, okay? To be able to say, integrated, organismic, and everything then works together and takes the time that it needs and so on. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, now say something in return. About anything, there's a lot of stuff here.
Well, I'm just thinking about how the archetypes can help. Can help be on the board of directors and replace some of the other voices that are there, and that they provide opportunities to ask questions from a different place, and can possibly allow people to be in harmony with the ones that are most important at each given time. They're not all going to be equal, but to ask from which archetype is there a question that will move me forward in this particular moment of decision, this particular commitment I do or don't make. So
that's good. Wait, don't go yet. When we get back to the ones that we are really connected to and we have to give, if we could only make, and this goes into the interaction in spiritual direction, okay? How wonderful it was when you asked me before, am I really prepared to say yes to this right now? Do I really mean it, And then you get to a moment like this and you don't want to fudge because everything about your integrity is at stake at this point. You're not going to You're not going to play around with that. Okay? So when the time comes that the people who come to you with things, that you can ask them the next question, you give something to somebody else. They say, yes, I do. What real reciprocities are going on?
Between the guide and the seeker, or the
No,
or
between
what-
the person.
between the
You know,
person and-
we're talking. Someone is engaged as relational problems, and they come up and so on and so forth, and they say, "I want to help. I want to give. I want to do," and then comes the question. What's the feedback? You know, what is it that you're asking for? What's the exchange that's going on?
What will continue the dialogue between you?
Mm-hmm.
What will you do to create something together that will move you out of the dilemma you're in into another thing that you co-create together?
Mm-hmm. You see, I'm trying to get to another level and ask the question, is my generosity pure? You know, what am I expecting back? What am I getting back? And it's so easily, you know, if you nod, I'm getting something back. If your face were totally blank, you know, and your eyes would be sort of, and I would talk, and I would stop talking. In order to stay in connection, there has to be something given. So when somebody says, lend me an ear, you know, is like saying, pay me attention. So I hear that, that's a basic thing. But then I need to ask a little bit else, what else is behind there? You know, what else do I want? And here we come back to that honesty again, you know. In some way, all of us want something, and it's not illegitimate to ask for that. I want respect. I'm serving in a way that is different than the way in which other people do the service, and you come to me for that. Okay? If I don't have the sense of respect along with it, then I find myself resenting, and that resentment is going to mix in, and it's going to poison everything that's going to happen. So for the sake of the purity, it's not only on the give, but also on the take. Now, what does that mean to you? Go ahead.
To be seen for what I bring, to be recognized for what the value is of our exchange.
And to check the flow that I'm attracting. I'm attracting a flow from that person. Okay. When people speak about charisma isn't something that a person has. Charisma is what you invest in a person, that the person gives you back in terms of love and consciousness and what have you, okay? I feel I'm getting from you charismatic energy. And I want to give it back to you in such a way that it'll do the best thing that it can do for what we are covenanted to do over here, okay? So that there is this, I just want to make sure that we are always aware of the give and the take, of the flow that goes on. And that would help, I think, in order to get the beauty going. Hey. Bless you. Bamir bist the shame, that let me explain Da-ra-ra-ra. Shame means beautiful. Ba-ba-ba-bum-bum-bum-bum. Da-da-ra-ra-ra. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Da-da-bum-ba-da-bum-ba-da-da-da-da-da. Da-da-da. Soon we will have a break, so don't you worry yourself. We are getting closer to the end of the circle. Bamir, this the shame. Da-da-da-da-da-dam. Da-dam-bam-ba-da-bam-ba-da-da-da-da-dam. Next. Who's next?
So, our question, how do we model and live from the essence of Scorpio, which moves from the darkness, the shadow, and the stinging scorpion of wild passion, unrestrained, through the transformation of the shedding snake to the vision of the eagle. And I would add, for the benefit of ourselves and all beings.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes we have a problem, we think we are very much alone. And we alone have to go through the dark places.
Right.
And it's, in some way, it's a heresy that we are alone. If Saint John of the Cross would have come to me and complained, what am I going to do in the dark night of the soul? First of all, I would say, you're going there to mine for us. You're going mining in there. There are treasures there, and by not flinching, by being present to them, you're going to find some of the treasures which you can bring back to us. But even while you're in the dark night of the soul, you still belong to the invisible church. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There are some other people, so when, for instance, a Chassid goes into a deep place, he would then say the words, B'Shem Kol Yisrael, I'm doing this in the name of all of Israel. I'm not alone in this thing. I think that the thing that would help so much is to say, a diver, there's some people who hold the lifelines for the diver and so on and so forth. So the Baal Shem Tov would say, if you're going to go and do an ascent of the soul, go to a high and dangerous place or a deep and dangerous place, make sure there's another person with you in the house, but they don't interfere with your agenda. The sense that there are some other people going to be there with you, for you, I think is very important. The problem also is in seeing people for spiritual direction is to make space for them not to be in the same place you are.
Yes.
Because until someone who is not used to diving down can get really freaked. You're nodding, tell more.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think that's one of, from my own personal experience of wanting to go to the dark, wanting to uncover whatever's in the way of my knowing God. I will go anywhere and do anything. And I assume that others, especially if they're coming to me for counseling, want the same thing. And I find that so many people just want Band-Aids so that they can keep functioning in the world. And the Scorpio model, which we all talked about in our group, is transformation. Let's get on with it. And how do we model that for others to accept the shadow, the darkness, and to become friends with it, to move through it, and I can see that my impatience is not understanding the fear of others, and that it's all right. Not everybody has to walk this path.
Mm-hmm. A while ago in Enlightenment, what do you call it, Enlightenment Today or something like this? What is enlightenment? Right. They had Guru and Pandit, and they were talking about transformation is good, translation is not. I'm using Ken Wilber's terms. For him, transformation is that kind of deep shift, change. And translation is a way of saying shifting things around more on the surface. It's not all transformational. It takes the good ideas, it finds a good way of dealing with them, but not at such a depth. So I wrote a letter to the editor, and I said that those people never had to deal, the Guru and the Pandit, didn't have to deal with the people in the pew. Why is it that they haven't checked in and found out from people who are clergy, who are working with other people in this way, and asked them, what is it like for you with your people? Could you demand transformation? Or do you have to create translation for them that makes it doable? And I think that's important to know, you know? Translation doesn't necessarily mean that you tell them the thing so they can leave it at that place, because they need a Band-Aid, that's clear, okay? But the Band-Aid should have some air in it, you know, so it comes in. What I'm trying to say is that the Band-Aid should be growthful. It should have a possibility for further growth. If it's a Band-Aid, I tell you, sometimes when you look at sectarian statements, all you need to do is accept Jesus Christ as your own personal Savior, you know? And for many people, that's like no depth to it, you know? It's just surface. And if that's the way it happens, it's a pity, because it doesn't allow for growth. But if someone were to say, just like that wonderful book that's called The Imitation of Christ, the word imitation today has a bad flavor, but imitatio meant at one point to follow, to go in the footsteps of, to emulate, you know, to take on those ways on yourself. I think that makes it a little different, you know. And to know that there are way stations in between, that's wonderful too. What does this bring to you?
Like, why do I think I'm God and I know what's the best thing for another person and how they should move and what they should do? And it's like, so that's part of the transformation of the Scorpio, that, you know, the ego is so powerful in the Scorpio to surrender to a higher wisdom and knowledge and allow myself to just be with a person where they're at and just take their hand and see what they need, and not presume to know, to ask.
Yeah. Wonderful. Hey, bless you.
Bless you. have given me back my connection to Judaism.
Huh? I'm glad.
So am
See?
I.
See, I'm sectarian enough for that. Whatsoever you have done for the least of my brothers, that you have done unto me. Whatsoever you have done for the least of my sisters, that you have done unto me. When I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. Now enter into the house of my Father. Next.
So we're the Sagittarians, and we have kind of a split. We have this huge amount of fire and energy and direction and just enthusiasm for lots and lots of ideas, and just we see in the distance and we're really excited about that. And then we also have this body of the horse, so we felt that we have to find a way to deal with all the head and the excitement and the distant goal that we see, and we also have the feeling of kind of a split between here's our body, and it's holding us down in a way, and it's sometimes hard to live with the tension of the opposites there, where we have that pull down. And so our question is how to hold that, how to honor the body and the heart, and also really honor that just zeal for the possibilities in the future.
I was going inside of me, behind my back, from the rump, that's where another set of legs is, and then comes back a whole other body. And just to feel that I have a tail too, and so on. So I let myself get into that. And to have the sense that goal which is over there, I can gallop to that, that really feels. There is a person who has been teaching people a way to get into doing the inner work better. Eugene Gendlin is his name, and he came up with something he calls focusing. Let's see who has found out about focusing here. Okay, thank you. What this means is that he is saying that, I'll put it in another language. If my organism is a democracy, everything would be good. But I have some parts of me that are censored, and I don't let them through to speak. But this doesn't mean that they stop being there. So I've got to go to the place where the hidden stuff is, and I have to ask every part of me to participate in things. if I were to go by a lot of the people who wrote religious tracts, they would want me to go just with the head and a little bit with the heart, or with the heart and a little bit with the head. But very seldom is there that sense of being fully embodied there. So what is so lovely about that image is that there is a human being there, the upper body, and there is the rest. And most of the time we forget that we are mammals, And that's where the limbic stuff comes in, that's where we want to celebrate, that's where we want to do all these things. I think that if I would want to say something about Sagittarians, is that they don't celebrate enough. That there is so much focus and not, hey, great story. A monastery. And there in the basement is a scriptorium. And a single candle is burning, and a monk is sitting there over a text. And he's crying, and the abbot comes down. She knows it already. And the abbot comes down and says, "What's the matter with you? Why are you crying?" He says, "I realized that it was a mistake made by the scribe. It says, celebrate, not celibate." Now watch this. How much release took place right now, okay? Could you imagine if I were to be able to check the energy that was released of stuff that was held down before? You see how much we want to celebrate, So I think that's what I'd like to suggest to the Sagittarians. But what do you think about what I said?
It really empowers it feels very different it feels scary, but it feels really different to bring that with the direction, and to also sit with it and spend time with it instead of looking out, looking in, and just being with it.
Mm. Yeah. I can sort of see myself with the hoofs.
We are the Capricorns. We are very grounded. And we don't know how to get up into the ethereal worlds very easily. And trust that we are hearing guidance from out there, from the source that's out there, and not so much grounded in here.
And so the question, just one more round of that. And so the question is?
How to trust and sense that the ethereal is there and can support us when we feel like we are just down here and grounded and no.
Notice how wonderful it has been, even when we didn't do your month or your sign, you still were here all the time. Nobody was absent from this. This is our togethering thing. And if we could know which ones of our friends to turn to when we need a particular quality, that's so wonderful. We can't do all things, but we can do the one that we do best if we can give this to the other people. Now, I'm not saying that you have to give up both the yearning and missing what you miss, So how do you get it? Okay. So let's watch and see what we just did, right? I tried to tune into a higher place. You were tuning into me, and at the same time you were getting a hit of that, right? So that's why where two or three are gathered together, it goes better. Bless you. So.
Well, when we were discussing this with the four of us, one of the things that we mentioned was that using those other qualities like water and air to help us move through the groundedness and get more fluid and more airy. And I look at Geminis and wonder, how do they just function on this planet? And I gravitate to people like that so I can learn it better. And so I do look for those qualities in other people that I can learn from.
I like to say that I'm a spiritual peeping Tom.
People get it all the time. I quote you all the time.
That's so wonderful, because why am I interested in Sufi tales or in Hasidic stories or so on and so forth? I want to be in that number. I want to be able to go to that place and to see. Like I said yesterday, I may not be a psychic, but I have imagination. Okay. Hey, thank you. What kind of a song goes with that? Hi ho, it's off to work.
It's off to work we go. That's not my song.
Okay, next.
We spent quite some time wrestling with how to frame our question just right, so I think I'm going to read, but it might not be exact. What we'd like to know is...
It's all right.
Where's the right place to hold the mic? And after we know that, we'd like to know how in our spiritual guidance relationships we can foster or create a living model for spiritual intimacy that can then be carried forth into our other relationships with other people and with animals and with other parts of life. And particularly, I think that's all.
That's so funny that an Aquarian should ask about means, right?
Well, yeah.
Because usually, if I get it right, there is that quality that says, it ain't what it looks like, it's deeper than that, It isn't that form, it is what energizes the form. And that would be wonderful. And at the same time, the people who are good at that are not necessarily good at the other stuff. Yeah. And so the question, I can understand where the question comes from. It says, look, if I go to the place where I feel easy at home doing what I'm doing, in that place I'm fine. But the dishes need to be washed, and income has to be generated and stuff like that. And it always comes out that the good we want to do in the world doesn't have the infrastructure, to protect that. And I want to say that this is such a terrible thing in a way, because imagine if you want to hang out a shingle and you want to say, yes, spiritual direction is offered here, What kind of energy exchange and how do you go about doing that? That you should be able to continue to do that it should bring the income for the time that you spend. Okay? And here is where, if I go back to the Aquarian mode, to the people who were the 60s, 70s, people who were doing the flowering of the world, and wanted to see everything. But they did not know how to be able to handle that. And they also figured that everybody, we have two models. The Eastern model that comes that if the guru is here, the guru has to have so and so many attendants and so many people to handle this, and advanced people who come in, and set up the place for him and make the propaganda and so on and so forth. That's the way it goes. But the people who got it in the 60s and 70s didn't feel that that's the way to go. If I've been able to go with a hit of acid to a place that the Upanishads are talking about, what do we need that whole hierarchical system about, okay? So there was that sense of wanting to undermine the hierarchical system and say, we're all the same. And that it couldn't maintain itself either. So what is it that's between hierarchy and that flat land? The organism. It comes always back to the organismic way. That my brain couldn't do what it's doing if my stomach didn't do what it's doing, and my stomach couldn't do it without the teeth and saliva and so on and so forth. So we're constantly, this is what I want to say, the organismic understanding of society, the organismic understanding of one's individuality, but also one's family and so on. And this is what's at stake here. And I have a feeling that we haven't fixed our reality maps to think organismically. In many ways, we think mechanistically still, like as if Descartes was the model. And the model is the organism. So I just want to say that it's impossible for the Aquarian to do the stuff without having some people who can help out. Just before, it was so wonderful to see what you brought to it. Somebody has to make sure that it's grounded, that it's there, and so on and so forth. So just the same way as they would want to attune to you when you go to the fluid beyond, you need to have them to help out with this. And this is why the only way to get it together is together. And we can't do this without really learning more about who are our allies and with whom we can do this. We can't do it alone. And that notion that came in at the time of the Renaissance, that the individual is doing it all, is wrong. The individual is part of the organism. That's always that thing. So how does that feel to you?
well, this issue of not being able to do it alone is kind of a burning one for me personally. So I think I might have finally gotten it. Maybe, we'll see. It feels like you heard the question underneath the question, the infrastructure of the question, and it does seem like it's this structure to hang things off of that we were sort of elusively trying to pin down. And it feels right. That's all I can say.
Wait another moment. It's not only that those Aquarians are schmegegs, that they can't handle the downstairs, you know? But what's important is that you create the container so that the Aquarian can ask some very important questions, which are something like this. The teachings that we have about truth, about beauty, about reality, about all that, can we take another look at those teachings, not from the outside, but from the inside, and ask, what was it that got those people to teach that? Because we can swear by a stack of Holy Writ, yeah, that whatever was written in there did not contain what they really knew, right? Because there was always more, there was always more, there was always more. So the Aquarian has a good way of asking the question, what's behind that, you know? Where does it flow from? And it's just because of that we can get into the post-triumphalist situation to say, aha, you know, when God feeds the people in India, he gives it to them with curry. Right? So then it has murtis and it has all kinds of beautiful ways in which they get fed. But what's behind that, you know? And the same thing you can say about every religion of origin that the people here have had. That what's behind that? Let's go into the deeper. What was the origin, the beginning flow of that thing? And for this you need Aquarians. So this is the age of, come on.
Dawning of the age of Aquarius, age of Aquarius,
Us. Okay, next.
Is this warm? So we spend time swimming around each other. In the ocean, forming a question. And we are feeling the pain and loss of the blessing of the patriarchy and wondering how we need to be to help heal that.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear this clear.
To heal and bring the wholeness of the patriarchy and the blessing of the patriarchy. And how do we need to be to help with that?
I still miss one word. Is it here?
The patriarchy? The
Patriarchy was the
blessing.
word. No, start.
Patriarchy.
I'm sorry, before I really want to hear clearly, and I'm fixing my ears. Go ahead.
Oh, good. Shall I start from the beginning?
Yeah.
So we're feeling the pain and loss of the blessing of the patriarchy.
Gotcha, okay. When I was about 8 years old, I remember once my dad took me to the synagogue. Must have been around February time. And somebody had made a picture that showed two fishes, one going in one direction, one the other direction. Two hands that clasped each other in friendship, and a glass of wine that they held in between. And in the Yiddish, it had written there, L'chaim brida l'chaim, which means to life, brother, to life, which is that season that is the season of Pisces. And if you look at the yin-yang, you see the same kind of a situation. That's a fish in this direction, a fish in that direction. Do you remember light boxes? I used to love to make light boxes. Did you ever see any of them in Emlyn Street or not?
In your office, maybe?
Yeah. I used to have one that was round and had a yin-yang thing, and there were like Christmas lights, blinking Christmas lights in each compartment. And sometimes one was red and the other one green, sometimes one was white and the other one was dark. Sometimes both of them hit the same color at the same time, and it was the kind of thing that I could sit in front of all the time and look at the way in which things harmonize together, pair together and do that. That's something of that Piscean thing that's there. Until we were able to bring out the problems of the abuses of patriarchy, we haven't been able to talk about the good part of patriarchy. And we aren't even finished yet with the bad parts of patriarchy. There's a lot still there. The people who would like to say to Rome, women need to be ordained, they bring something very special to it. It's the fish that goes into the other direction, as it were. You need that. When Christians used to put the sign of the ichtos to recognize each other, the sign of the fish, it's a pity that they didn't do the second fish, If I were to be, again, if I am a rich man, I would make such a thing with two fishes to go on the back of the car. You know what I mean? I still can take a little paint and do this on my car. Do two fishes, It doesn't have to say anything bad about the idea of the fish that's there. It's just to say there's another fish around. And I think when I look at the way in which matriarchy also was bad, and I don't think we'll be able to restore the aspect of matriarchy that we need in our day without really finding out what the shadow side of matriarchy was, because most of the time we don't realize it. But in the nasty jokes that you have about the Jewish mother, the Italian mother, the dentate vagina mother, all those heavy images that they come up with in the colliness, the destructiveness of the mother and so on. that we won't be able to straighten that one out. There still is so much left of the wrong side of patriarchy. On the other hand, how do you go about healing that, you know? I don't have a finished thing here, you know. With my children, I try to be differently, you know. I'm getting into the age where, according to Jung, that which used to be like animus, masculine, has become anima, the feminine part of me. And I found how wonderful it is sometimes when the kids can be in touch with that and to feel that when they want some fathering from me, that it's not weakness, you know, that they don't come because they're worthless. You know, there is a wonderful thing to be able to say, what a good thing that you've been doing. Come, let me give you a hug, you know, in going into this thing. The same with grandparents. Grandparents are very important because parents can, you know, when they want family values aren't going to come from parents. Children always have to get rid of what the parents. But the parents have the children and the grandparents as enemies. So the children and the grandparents are allies. So there is something in the transmission of what happens there, and that's important. The same way it's important that older women, the crones, you look at that word crone, you know, at one point had some bad connotations from the fairy tales and how they drew them. But if you looked at the Native American elder women who really held the tribe together and they knew what was happening, that is a very important part for that. And I don't think that the patriarch people are yet ready fully to embrace the wisdom of the crone people. I think when that happens, we're going to be in a much, much better place. I had this conversation with Pirzia, and I sent him a translation of something by Reb Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, one of the Hasidic masters. He asked, why is it that letters in the Torah mustn't touch one another, that each letter has to be freestanding? And he offers there that the freestanding place, that the white stuff around there is also a writing, but it's not visible to us yet. We haven't yet learned how to read the white letters of the scripture. Okay? You see what, and that's what the crones have had, that they were able to read. When somebody would say, this is the way it ought to be done, there was a way in which, how would I put it, there's this joke about this woman who goes to church and lights a candle and stands in front of Virgin Mary and talks her heart out and so on and so forth. And the priest doesn't like that, so he stands behind the crucifix and says, you should be talking to me, not to her. So she says, shut up, Junior, I'm talking to your mother. You know, there is a way in which that part of understanding has to be there. So by offering, you know, you make me want to be a patriarch. You know, like when I start asking about what is that role, the way it is meant to be able to restore it, so we have to also restore the other side. What does that mean to you?
What I feel is gratitude for being able to speak about it.
Okay. Do you remember Schubert's Forelle? Anybody? No? Okay, I don't know another fish song. It's the trout, huh?
Drink it up, fill your cup, drink it up.
Okay, we're going to have a break in a moment. I just want to go with you to another few minutes of quiet. Would you reflect on what you have learned from this conversation, from going around the year and the zodiac and all these, and see what you would like to put into your mind as a way of a remembering thing, you know? Na, 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 ra, ra, ra. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-da-da-da-da. Amen. I used to have a program that was a long time ago, God in Tin Pan Alley. You know, the crying in the chapel in the moonlight and crossing over the bridge, you know, and all those wonderful things that were there. And Patty Page singing, Our Father who art in heaven, all these. I think it's important to have that kind of thing that the people in the Roman Catholic Church, let me get up and sit there instead so I can see you better. It's okay. They used to call that in monasteries recreation, which meant that it was what they needed to do in order to enjoy their conviviality, you know, with each other, sing the songs and play and tell stories and do that, so that they could have some social connection with each other. I have a sense that with the television and with all those things that are such isolators, you know, if you're in the iPod, you can't hear what I have to say. So in every which way, it is more isolation and drawn in to oneself. And whatever we can do to create these kinds of things, you know, I think of Matt Fox, when he was doing these raves. It was such a wonderful thing, because the business of the celebration that people would have, it gave him more energy and said, yes, there is something to it. The sense that God stuff can be fun. When you hear, look in the book of Psalms and you find so many ways in which it says, Hod v'hadar lefanav, yismechu b'malchut choshomer Shabbat. There's always joy in God's place and so on and so forth. So that sense, I feel, is really lacking. So let us say you have about 7 people, let me take 7 people, who come to you more or less regularly for spiritual direction. And if you can, at least before the new moon or during the new moon, or the full moon, whichever is the better one for you. Bring the people together for some of that conviviality, listening to an inspiring piece of music, talk to each other, tell stories. I wish for you that each time somebody tells you, remember what you told me 5 years ago? It really made such a difference. It changed my life. Yeah, you all nod. You had some people come and say this to you. Well, I wish for you to have that kind of a virtual scrapbook, that you could open anytime you want and go and visit in there and see not what you did, but how you were deployed to help a person. And to find the great joy, I was deployed to help the person in that thing. So when we were talking yesterday about the need to be answerable to have some people with whom we can talk about these things, that comes out with this conviviality. Distance of space is no longer an excuse. One by one the excuses are taken from us. You remember when you had the lazy guy's guide to enlightenment, right? So many wonderful things are around, from music and from talks and from this and from that we have no longer an excuse. And with Skype, it says in the Midrash that there is such a thing that God has made, that there's a light that goes from one end of the world to the other, and the saints can converse in that light with each other. Well, it's happening, When you think of the way in which Teilhard de Chardin was talking, there's sometimes the news is bad and everything else is troublesome and so on. But Teilhard de Chardin, when he was talking about what will it take for the world, where are we going? So he pointed out that there was a lithosphere. First, Earth was stone. And then it became a biosphere. There was life around it. And now it is a noosphere. There's intelligence, there is awareness, and it spans the globe. It's so amazing how it spans the globe. I was reading Ray Kurzweil, in which he is describing to us that, when you look at a person who may have a pacemaker and already new cataract lenses underneath, I've got a piece of plastic that's holding my diaphragm together. More and more we're becoming bionic people, Adding to it the glasses that I wear, the hearing aid I've got in here, the dentures in my mouth, it's just wonderful. Could you right? So, can you imagine if I were to be able to have a kind of implant that would make me remember, that my hard drive, when I'm trying to remember something, it would come up faster. When there would be a situation in which, just as I give you my cell phone number, you would give me your telepathy number, right? Well, it's not, telephone means how we, talk over distance. Well, there's a possibility that we might be able to have something in which thought forms would be able to move from one person to that space that is happening. So what I want to say, this all brings us back to the business that you should get each other's Skype numbers. And there are many other ways in which you can do it today with a camera. And so you can have that conversation with the person with whom you are. And you knit that network stronger of the people who talk to each other about these things. And that's what Teilhard de Chardin was saying is the next phase, because the phase of bringing more awareness to the planet is the way to prepare for the divinization of the planet. Okay? So these are just wonderful things. So the best that can happen is that you will know whom to contact with each other. And that from this seminar that you had, from this time you spent together, that you can refresh that from time to time, because it's really, it's a good way of budgeting. You spend time and money and to be here, so you want to be able to protect your investment, and you do that best by talking to each other about those things. Today in the prophetic reading in the synagogue in Malachi, the prophet says, "Then did those who fear the Lord speak to one another, and God eavesdropped on them." And he wrote it into his little book that has the title, "Those are my friends who honor my name," It's such a wonderful statement. In other words, it doesn't get lost. These conversations are what weaves together the strands that bring about the healing of the brokenness that is here. So I wish for you to be able to do it. And now I'm going to sit with you just a little bit more in quiet, and that's the last thing I want to do with you. For now. I just bought life insurance. Someone asked me this question, said, "How come you're teaching Kabbalah in a weekend? After all, it would take years for this kind of study. How could you undertake to do that?" And my answer is, I'm not teaching, I'm installing software. You know the difference. You can always boot the software yourself. So I'd like to make an installation of Zalman software to you, okay? So I'm going to sit quiet and I'll try and open up as much as I can. And I want for you to do the same and to see what you need to do so that the next time you want to boot up what happened today, both in the feeling place and in the reason place and in the intuition place, so that it can come back to you, that you could use that, say, what would this be like, in this software, okay? good. If I meet a preacher on the way who says to me, Zalman, have you been saved? I've been saved.